one of the things when we set out to do this was we wanted to go to those places where literally there had been no research done other than ethnographic studies which might have been done by sociologists. But really this was the much neglected area in terms of understanding what was going on with consumers and branding. Going into people's homes, going out in their shopping environments, wandering into cyber cafes, which were a real surprise because these were not small as we imagined they would be. There would be 250 terminals and completely packed during the daytime because very few people had computers at home. They would be surfing in the cyber cafes. While we expected Chinese brands to be significantly stronger in the lower tier, what was really interesting was the regional nature of the market, because up until the second and third tier you found that everything in terms of aspirations, in terms of usage of brands would be a change in terms of degrees of what we would see in the bigger cities. But in the smaller towns it would almost be like a wall, because you would find it was only the regional brands which were very good, or the regional supermarket chains were much stronger than any of the international chains, if they were there at all. The only example that we came across was a Walmart in a place called Xiaguan in Yunnan province, and on a Sunday morning it was completely deserted because everyone was doing their fresh vegetable and fruit and meat shopping in the wet market and not in the supermarket as they would do in the big cities. There was a huge sense of family and community. You had places where most of the male population was away, working in the big cities and leaving behind children in care of either their mothers or their grandparents, and children were growing up to be much more socially adjusted in these places than they would be in the big cities. Composition of the family itself was quite different, because almost every family that we met either had 2 children or they had 1 child and the mother was sporting a bump. Part of the reason for that was that there is much less government surveillance in the smaller towns, but the other is that there was a very high preference for the male child, I mean, as per the government regulations, certainly in the village, if your firstborn was a girl, you are allowed to have a second child. So we ran into people who had changed their hukou from the urban to a rural hukou simply so that they could have a second child, because it just shows the kind of ingenuity that families have in circumventing some of the policies or the regulations of the government. The average family size in China is 3.6. Yeah, which is closer to 4 than it is to having 1 child in a family, and which puts into perspective the fact that one of the government authorities actually said that it is only 20% of all families in China that have 1 child. There's between 60 to 70% who have 2 children, and the minorities are allowed to have more than that. The marketing implications for that are quite substantial, because usually when you're in advertising in say India, where I come from, or in the West, when you show a family, you show with a family has at least 2 kids. Often it's the perfect balance of showing a son and a daughter in communications. And in China, that's very rarely the case. You show the one, spoiled emperor or empress, and everyone, the grandparents, the parents, everyone doting upon that child. But the reality is that you are looking at 2-child families. But there is another implication, which is certainly for kid brands, is that you're looking at an opportunity of building longer lifetime value for brands, because it's not just those 3 years, focusing all your attention on 1 child, but a longer period of time.